Using practice profiles to monitor UDL implementation. Presenters. Black and white photo of a woman with dark hair smiling. To the right, a logo for the State Support Team Region 6. The number 6 appears in the center of an apple illustration. Sherry Smith, SST6 at Smith43326. To the right, a black Twitter logo, a simple bird graphic. Black and white photo of a man smiling at the camera. To the left, the OCALI logo. Black text in white circles reads OCALI. Ron Rogers, OCALI, at Ron B. Rogers. To the left, a black Twitter logo, simple bird graphic.
Welcome to Using Practice Profiles to Monitor Universal Design for Learning Implementation. I'm Ron Rogers with OCALI, and with me today I have...
Hi, I'm Sherry Smith. I'm from State Support Team Region 6 in Ohio, and one of the areas I focus on in my position is Universal Design for Learning.
And Sherry and I, we realize your time's really important, so we're going to stick right to our 30-minute limit on this, and hopefully everybody gets exactly what they came for.
Go to webinar chat window.
Okay, so if you're using the tools, here's what we'd like to ask you to do. If there's a situation where if we ask if you'd like to use your microphone, then we'd ask you to raise your hand. So if you would, maybe look and make sure you know where that button's at in case we ask for it. And then there's a mute place. You probably won't need that area. But the question area is the important piece. So please take a look at the question area and kind of know how to use that, because we're going to have you use the question area as your area to answer our questions, not so much to ask questions. Of course you can, but to answer some of ours, and then we'll verbally talk about what those were as you post them. So with that said, we'll go to the next one. So who's with us today? Are you a teacher or a parent? And if you would, please use your question box to answer that, and we will be reviewing what everyone says. Okay, we have a teacher, we have an AT consultant, instructional designer, another teacher, some AT specialists, we have some assistive technology folks, we have Pamela from Chile, who's a special education teacher. Welcome from Chile, Pamela. We have Lisa, which we know she's from State Support Team, and Jackie from one of the State Support Teams here in Ohio. Let's see. How they just keep flying in. If you haven't answered, you still have a second too. Okay, well, we're going to move on to the next slide. It looks like we've got a pretty big mix of people. Twitter, using Twitter. So if you would, please feel free to, behind the scenes, use hashtag OHUDL for all of your Twitter posts. And Sherry and I will try to keep, we'll try to look at those as we can. The I can statements today are as follows. I can describe a practice profile, and I can apply a practice profile to my current implementation monitoring approach. That's where we hope you, that's the things that we hope you can say I can when we're finished today. So one of the things I would like to bring up, though, as we get started is I've noticed in the world of education, implementation doesn't happen naturally. Sometimes not at all. I've even heard people say, this is just the flavor of the month. It'll come and it'll go. Things come and things do go. And sometimes it's without truly finding out whether or not it works. It seems that practice profiles would help. I wouldn't want to go through heart surgery unless I knew the person had been trained in the heart surgery sciences of high quality research and practices. How about you, Sherry? What do you think?
I totally agree. In fact, something I hear, unfortunately, is folks will say, oh yeah, we've done UDL, we tried that, it didn't work. Well, but did you really try it? Did you dig into it? Did you really develop and define it? And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how can we define that? How can we have high quality implementation? And so a way that we can do that is with a tool called a practice profile. And basically, a practice profile is a document that describes a few things on the screen. So what is your philosophy? What are your values? What does the organization really value, and what is the strategy that you are choosing, or the innovation that you're choosing to focus on? So it provides a clear description of the essential components or functions. And it begins to operationalize that strategy. So what you want to do in a practice profile is really capture actions that are teachable, learnable, doable, and accessible. So you can teach the strategy. Others can learn it. It's something all teachers can do. And you can really check, right, to make sure that they're doing that. And that's that fourth element. It's really getting to that element of fidelity.
So the why. Why did you attend this webinar? If you would, in the question box on the GoToMeeting, type in your why. Why did you attend the webinar today? And I'm looking in the question box to see if anybody's put that in there. And you just type in the question box your why. Oh, they're starting to roll in now. Thank you. So, for example, how to help support teachers who want to start implementing UDL. To learn more about this whole implementation idea. Gain strategies for making online courses more accessible to a wide variety of learners. Expand implementation district-wide. Support schools in Ohio to use UDL, since I think it's a great thing. To learn more about UDL and how to get administrators to buy in. Oh my goodness, we've got so many people here. It's how to learn better implementation strategies in the school. More about UDL implementation. Gathering as much information as I can. A state agency developing practice profiles and how we need high quality ones for UDL. That goes beyond just clarifying each of the guidelines. There's more to it than that. Well, we've got lots here, Sherry. Wow.
Yeah, we do. And I was curious to see what some of those responses, would be. Do people want to know more about practice profiles in UDL? Are they interested in monitoring? So thank you for that feedback. Some of you had mentioned best practices or really using the research. And so when you're talking about practice profiles, that's exactly what you do. You use the best available research. You look at the competencies linked with that innovation or with that strategy, and you really take into account what works from practitioners. So the 5 steps needed to create it are listed on the screen. The semi-structured interview, so really gathering that information from the field, systematic scoping reviews, document reviews, vetting and consensus building, and usability testing. But if you have any type of leadership teams, district level teams, building level teams, TBTs, we call them in Ohio, you're already doing some of this. You're really identifying a strategy, you're researching the strategy, and you're kind of testing it to see what works. So practice profiles fit really nicely into that structure. And I just want to say before we continue that this all comes from implementation science. So implementation science is the study of factors that influence the full and effective use of innovations in practice. The goal is not to answer factual questions about what it is, but rather to determine what is required. And so I just want to put this out there. UDL has been defined, and it's been defined beautifully. There's lots of research and there's lots of resources describing what UDL is. Today, we're really going to talk about what is required for successful UDL implementation. So what are the practitioners going to do when they're implementing the guidelines, for example, the UDL guidelines? And Ron had an analogy around the medical field. Was it a surgeon?
Yeah, heart surgeon.
A heart surgeon. So it's important to notice too that, or to know also that implementation science isn't just in education. The medical field is really embracing it as well. They want to make sure that they are really implementing new innovations with fidelity, right? Because really in that field, it's a matter of life or death.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you have high cholesterol, you start thinking about that early in life. Okay, so let's jump to a poll. I'm going to launch the poll, and it's going to be asking, are you using implementation science presently? And if you would answer the question, that would be great. And then if you would hit submit, that would even be better. And then we will show here in a minute just exactly where everybody's at. And so far, 68% have voted. We know that some people may be driving in their car, so they may not be able to vote, although they are on with us, which also explains the reason that Sherry and I will sometimes read the slides, because we don't want our drivers out there trying to read slides as we're doing this presentation. So a lot of times we will say what's on the slide as well as add to that slide. Okay, looks like 68% have voted, and that is about all that's going to vote. So we're going to close the poll and show it. And here's the results. Are you using implementation science presently? 42% says yes, they are. 42% says no, they're not. And 15% say they're thinking about it. So that's pretty cool results, isn't it, Sherry?
That is cool. I had no idea what we'd get from that.
Yeah, I didn't either. And Sherry, I don't know if you noticed, but we doubled our numbers of people at about 3 minutes into this presentation. So we are setting really good with the number of people that have come to this out of the percentage that signed up. So that's really good.
Well, great. Well, welcome everyone.
So I'm going to hide the results, and we will go back to our next slide.
Okay, so let's really get into, what is a practice profile? What is this tool that's supposed to help us with monitoring implementation? And first, in UDL fashion, we're going to start with an analogy. So this practice profile, as we defined it, is really a description of what practices need to be implemented to give us the best chocolate chip cookie ever. So maybe this is a practice profile for a bakery somewhere. And what you would need to do in a practice profile is identify certain core components or components that are really critical to whatever you're trying to do. And so right now we're trying to make the best chocolate chip cookie ever. I do want to point out, as it says on the bottom of the screen, that this comes from the work, this format of this practice profile comes from the work of Dr. Michelle Duda, who's an implementation scientist and is currently actually working with our state with implementation science. So the first column, as many of you can see, is the critical component. So this is, the first one is math literacy. And then the next column is the contribution that component has to the outcome. So a description of why is it important. So why do people who are making cookies need to know about math literacy? And really that's because we want them to understand the units of measurement, and we want them to be able to convert the ingredients to larger amounts. So you have the critical component, you have the why statement, and then the next part is the rubric-like component of the practice profile. And this could look a few different ways. This particular one has a column for ideal expected implementation, an acceptable variation of that implementation, a beginning or another acceptable variation, acknowledging that you're on your way, but you're not to ideal, and then also an unacceptable or harmful variation. So just like in education, when you're making a cookie, there are things that are going to be really harmful to that practice. So for example, an ideal implementation, you want to be able to know the difference between measuring a dry ingredient and measuring a liquid. There's probably going to be different, and I'm no cookie expert in making cookies, but hopefully the people that created this are. It's just an example, but I've heard that there are different tools that you will use when you're measuring dry ingredients versus liquid ingredients. And then you want to be really skilled at being able to convert measurements too. So all of that is defined in the ideal column. In the acceptable variation, which is the next column, maybe you're using the same cup or spoon to measure the liquid measurements. So you're measuring them, but it's not quite the way we want you to do it. You're not quite there. Another variation in the beginning column you could see is you're attempting to, when you're talking about converting measurement, you're attempting to increase or decrease the ingredients, but there's not a systematic way to do it. So what would be harmful then is to guess, right? To guess at the amount of ingredients, not to refer to the recipe, guessing how long you would cook them and what temperature. If you've ever made cookies, you don't want to just be guessing because you're going to end up with a mess, right? So it is important to also point out what it is not. And that's essentially what this section does. What it is, and then what it isn't. And the next column really identifies, so what are some key skills? What knowledge or abilities are needed to make this happen? You know, maybe at this cookie factory, they want everybody to really know how to measure ingredients. And they want them to go through the 101 certification on measurements and conversions. So those are all going to be key skills that are needed to make this happen, this component. And then, you know, there's a driver analysis part 2, which we won't get into today, but what training is needed? I kind of mentioned the certification. You know, do we want to select people to work at our factory who already have these skills? Are we going to set up training to make sure that they are, they're learning as they go along? Are we going to have coaches? How is our organization going to support this critical component? And finally, areas of impact. So how do we know when we've got it? Well, we would want our practitioners making the cookies to be using the correct tools, using the correct measurements. And, you know, maybe we just want to have a taste test and we want our cookie to taste really good. So there's a question, should all 3 behaviors in ideal be referenced in each of the other variations? Thank you. That's a good example. So typically you will see that. This isn't a really complete example. There's just kind of enough ideas in here to kind of get you thinking, but this example isn't fully developed. And there are other critical components in making a chocolate chip cookie. You know, maybe there's problem solving, maybe there's quality control where you would want to do that taste test. There's communication among the people that work at the bakery. So this is just the beginnings of what a practice profile could look like if you're trying to create the best chocolate chip cookie. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so moving this into UDL, we're going to look at the idea of the expert learner. And CAST has done a really good job of describing what the expert learner is. We want students to be expert learners. We want them to be resourceful and knowledgeable. We want them to be strategic and goal-directed. We want them to be purposeful and motivated. So if I wanted this to be my strategy for my district, per se, I would want to include some of this as my critical components. And some of these can go together. So we're going to take a look at formulate plans for learning. Some of what's bulleted here you can see sort of fits into formulate plans for learning. Now, when working in the past, as I've been working with teachers and districts and they're trying to create a practice profile, it never fails. What they always want to go to first is describe what the students are going to do. And as you've seen, in the last example, it's really about the practitioner. You're really defining adult actions when you're trying to monitor implementation. But sometimes it can be helpful to define what it's going to look like for the student. So I say embrace it. You know, if it helps to do this, go ahead. And if you have the handout, you can see that the top is about the student and the bottom is about the teacher. So we want students to formulate plans. Well, why is that important? A student needs to know how to create a plan to continue to learn when there is no teacher involved in any setting. So they can be lifelong learners. They can take this with them after they graduate and they've become expert learners and they can apply it into their chosen profession, into their life. So that's what this example shows. Just some ideas in the ideal column as to what it would look like for the student, what might be harmful. So for example, it might be harmful that someone else is setting the goal for the student. Now, I think you can provide scaffolding for the student, but to never let the student take ownership of that is not facilitating an expert learner. And in some situations, it's against the law. For example, predetermination, in terms of like a transition goal. You can't tell a student what they're going to be in their future, or only give them limited options. That's against the law, right? You have to let them decide. It's about them and their goals in life. So there again are some things that are harmful, and you want to include that. What knowledge will the students need? And then what would this look like? How could we test that they have it? So the bottom half of your handout is really this. It's really focused on the professional. And this is the practice profile that you will use, or this is an example of a practice profile that you could use to monitor implementation. So how are you helping students? How are you facilitating students in the creation of their learning plans? Well, in the ideal column, you would want, again, teachable, doable, learnable description. So teach and model goal setting, including short and long-term goals. Teach and model how to include and evaluate learning preference supports and strategies that have been helpful in previous learning. And this may not be specific enough for you. Maybe this is something that is, for example, a building definition or a district definition. But you need to, as a teacher, maybe take it one step further and make it relevant to your setting. So in the handout, there's a second page where you can apply this to maybe your teacher team. Maybe you're as a group of teachers, your English teachers, and you can say, okay, what is this going to look like in an English classroom? And so that's why I included an example here, an example with writing goals. So students who write one sentence after considering a goal of, okay, well, I want to be able to write a paragraph, they set short-term goals for writing 2 sentences. And the teacher prompts them, well, how do you think you're going to get to your goals? Well, I want to utilize the editing strategy that you taught us, the COP strategy, and the finger space technique. Some teachers, some schools use the spaghetti versus the meatball space, the spaghetti between the words, or the letters in the word, and the meatball space between the words. So you can be specific about what that is going to look like in your classroom when you're applying this. Now, you may notice that this probably isn't something you're going to jump in and do right away, because if you haven't taught students to self-assess, to set goals, and to think about what strategies are going to help them reach their goal, it might be hard to jump right in and do a formal, or to help them formulate a learning plan. So you would want to scaffold that. And that's really, if you use the UDL guidelines, it sort of takes you to that. One thing I wanted to remember to point out is that as you're using this tool to kind of monitor implementation, it can really inform what the needs of the school might be, what the needs of the teacher team might be. For example, as you can see in the knowledge, skills, and abilities column, goal setting instruction. You might find that when you try to do this, you need to take a step back and maybe take a deeper look at, well, how do we instruct students on setting goals? If they're not getting it, that might be why. Another thing to consider is all students can be expert learners, even low incidence students. So this is for gifted students, this is for students with disabilities, this is for even low incidence students. I remember the first time I shared this with teachers, I had one teacher say, well, I could see this for my advanced class, for my gifted students, but not most of my students aren't going to be here. They're not going to be able to do this. And I really want to push you to think that all means all. All students can be expert learners, and so all students should be able to do this. It just might take a little bit more scaffolding, a little bit more support, and it's going to look differently. It's going to look different for different students. So how do we use this tool to monitor implementation? Well, you'd want to do some sort of checks in the classroom, and this could be teachers observing other teachers. It could be coaches observing teachers, administrators observing teachers in a non-evaluative way, because this is a check on implementation. So do you see the behaviors that are included in your practice profile in the classroom? Is there evidence that these practices are happening? And if not, can you really say that you've tried it and that it didn't work, right? I mean, you really have to do that check. Are we really implementing with fidelity? Is your system supporting the implementation? So these are additional questions you could ask yourself. So are the desired actions, skills, knowledge, and abilities mentioned when you're hiring, interviewing, and recruiting new staff members? So one district I'm working with, they've included for their district practice profile and the key knowledge, skills, and abilities, the UDL guidelines. They want everybody in the district to be trained in the UDL guidelines. And so then taking it that next step further, is this something you want to put into your interview process when you're selecting teachers? Are you offering professional learning opportunities that align with what's detailed in your practice profile? A lot of times your practice profile will help inform what your learning opportunities might need to be. When I'm in the classroom, I see we're struggling in this area. So then you need to support that with PD. Are teachers receiving ongoing job-embedded support and coaching? And this can happen in teacher teams. Every week, are we talking about the profile? Are we collaborating together? Are we working on it? And then your data check. What data do we have to suggest that this implementation, the implementation of UDL is working? And are there internal and external supports that we may need to consider?
Upcoming webinar title: Rubrics and UDL to support learners. Description: this webinar will explore the why, what, and how of the rubrics within the UDL framework. Date: January 10th, 2018, 3:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Presenter: Ron Rogers. Hosted by OCALI.
Okay, so, wow, Sherry is so good with all this stuff. It's just unbelievable the knowledge that she has. And it's so exciting to hear the things that are going on. And, the best part is the fact that, she's in with those districts and she's moving those districts in this area. So she knows the ins and outs, and she was able to share some of that with you in 30 minutes or less. And she's just incredible with that. So always feel free to get a hold of either Sherry or I if you have any other questions or anything, or put them in the question box and we'll try to get to them, if not today, but in the future. So anyway, we do have a couple things here we'd like to let you know. The next webinar is Rubrics in UDL to support learners. And as you'll see, it's January 10th from 3:30 to 4. And the next thing that you'll notice is our Twitter. If you would join one of the best chats on Twitter, it's the hashtag UDL chat. It's at 9 p.m. every Eastern time, every first and third Wednesday. And again, that's hashtag UDL chat, 9 p.m. Eastern time, every first and third Wednesday. I know a lot of you that are on here today with us go to that and do that, and they enjoy it. And Pamela, thanks a lot for thanking Sherry. She appreciates that.
Advertisement for the UDL IRN International Summit 2018. Learning Design for Everyone. Orlando, Florida, April 25th through the 27th. Summit.udl-irn.org.
Okay, so I guess one final quick advertisement we wanted to share is the Universal Design for Learning Implementation and Research Network International Summit is happening in April in Orlando, Florida, and I will be there. I chair a group for UDL implementation, so I will be there presenting on practice profiles. We're currently working on a practice profile to share, and this is international. There are people from all over working on this practice profile. So if you're interested in more, sign up for the summit, and hopefully we'll see you there in Florida.
Center of the page. Thank you. Using practice profiles to monitor UDL implementation. Black and white photo of a woman with dark hair smiling. To the right, a logo for State Support Team Region 6. The number 6 appears in the center of an apple illustration. Sherry Smith, SST6 at Smith43326. To the right, a black Twitter logo. Simple bird graphic. Black and white photo of a man smiling at the camera. To the left, the OCALI logo. Black text in white circles reads OCALI. Ron Rogers, OCALI, at Ron B. Rogers. To the left, a black Twitter logo, simple bird graphic.
All right. And then the very last slide, of course, is us thanking you. We'd like to thank everyone that logged into our 30-minute webinar today. We hope you walked away with more knowledge and important points to reflect on from this. And we know your time's precious. We want to make every minute worth your time. So be sure to download the handouts. And thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you.